Before we get too far along, I would like to introduce everyone to Josie Harms. Where's Josie? Josie is my new press secretary. So after today, you'll be speaking to her in person as far as press contacts. She worked previously twice as an intern in our office, and during that time I was very impressed with her skill set, her talents, her people skills. She was a great addition to our office then, and so now we've got her back on a full-time basis, so welcome, Josie. I'd like to give everyone to start out with a update on our property tax conversations. Last week I told the legislative leadership that I'd be creating a property tax working group. I asked them to recommend members from their chambers to join that group. That working group met for the first meeting on Monday. Both houses were very engaged in the conversation, and we'll be doing our second meeting later today. And I've also spoke to leadership in both chambers about expanding that group to include more legislators. Yesterday, we introduced a vehicle bill in the House State Affairs. That bill number is 1234. That will be the vehicle we'll use in the legislature to contain the final product of that working group. Our conversations in that regard have obviously focused on owner-occupied. When you're talking about property taxes, there's always the conversation of doing something that won't create a shift between classes of property. In this case, I've reminded people for the past several years, the overall property tax burden has already shifted. It's shifted from other classes of property onto owner-occupied. So we are specifically looking for ways to tamp down the increase in owner-occupied property taxes in a very targeted approach. And I'm pretty confident, based on our first meeting that went very well, that we'll be able to find a solution this session. Also wanted to give an update on tribal relations. Before she left office, Governor Noem asked several of our tribal leaders to reset and rebuild with me as the next governor. When Chairman Renville gave his State of the Tribes address, he echoed that sentiment, and I couldn't agree more. And I believe that we're off to a good start. Yesterday, two big developments happened that encouraged me about the future of tribal relations in South Dakota. I met with President Frank Starr comes out and the leadership from the Oglala Sioux tribe in this room yesterday. We discussed building common ground and working together from a place of trust. In particular, we discussed how we can help some of their law enforcement needs. We discussed the Tribal Law Enforcement Training Academy and law enforcement agreements. It was a great conversation, and I thought it was a great first step in the right direction. Not long after that, we heard from the Lower Brule Sioux tribe that they had removed their management of Secretary Noem. In their announcement, they resolved that we are determined to move forward with a positive tribal-state relationship based on mutual respect. And again, I couldn't agree more. We will continue to move the ball forward in rebuilding relationship with our state's sovereign tribal nations. And since the last time I talked to you, I now have a lieutenant governor, and he has been confirmed. I'm very encouraged by that, encouraged about the relationship with the legislature with the addition of Tony. For him to get a unanimous vote from both chambers, I thought was very encouraging. So we got our team together and it's off to the races. We have a session ahead of us, and I'm very optimistic in the team that I've got behind me right now. My focus will continue to be on open civil communications and to keep South Dakota strong, safe, and free. One more thing before we get started. We'll be making an announcement later today about the first bill that I will sign into law as a governor. And you are all invited to that signing. It will take place tomorrow morning in my office, and more details on that will be forthcoming. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all for questions.
Yes, Governor Austin Goss, Dakota Scout. Happy belated birthday, first off. I wanted to just see if you could give a little more information about that meeting you had with President Starr comes out yesterday, maybe what some of those shared priorities are, what a little bit more of that conversation looked like, and how you want to build on that in the future here.
Yeah, a lot of the conversation was directly between me and Starr comes out, and it was a lot of it was just about the trust factor and where we're at, the place that we're coming from, and rebuilding the trust. It then went into some of the areas that I consider maybe not low-hanging fruit, but obvious issues, like with memorandums of understanding or mutual aid agreements. Specifically, that conversation focused a lot about law enforcement. I told them about my situation living in the center of Meade County, and a brother that was deputy sheriff in that area, and the number of times that he was chased a bad guy to the edge of the reservation and then had to give up pursuit, and just how counterproductive it is for us not to have a mutual relationship of trust and having agreements to help each other in both directions from a law enforcement perspective. So that was the main focus of the conversation, but a lot of just give and take as far as just building the relationships, the open lines of communications. I texted him last night and gave him my personal cell phone number, and along with a message of how much I appreciated our conversation and the ability to rebuild those relationships. He responded in kind, and so very encouraging.
Governor, Stu Whitney with South Dakota News Watch. The final funding bill for the prison is going to sound like it may go down to the wire. Is this going to be a good test of your ability to sort of wrangle this legislature a little bit with your ranching background to get this thing across the finish line? And number two, if it does not pass, what is the next option for getting that prison site finalized?
Well, I'm not prepared to discuss it not happening. I believe that it will. I think the legislators, for the most part, are very, well, we'll go beyond that. I've served in the legislature, and this is a new class, so obviously there's question marks. But I think when the facts are on the table and the legislators have a chance to be informed and see what's at stake, and the ones that haven't, I've encouraged any of the legislators that have doubts to take a tour of the prison, as I did. Because even from the place that I was coming from, to take that tour left a strong impression on me. Just to see the conditions that we have with that current facility, it's a dark feeling just being in there. It is so gothic and so outdated and so impractical. You saw in the news last night in the camera, crawling over plumbing to get from point A to point B. When I was there, we ran into a nurse that was carrying medical supplies, and I think there were blood tests or something, a tray. And I pictured her trying to do a balancing act, carrying this full tray, crawling over plumbing to get to her next destination. Just things like that. Showers, you go down a narrow stairway all the way to the bottom of where they have the group showers, and shower heads hanging on rusty pipes. And you look up at the ceiling, you see concrete crumbling from the ceilings. We need to resolve that, and it needs to be this year. So I'm not going to talk about failure. I would say this: failure is not an option. We have our backs against the wall. It's a miracle we haven't been sued as a state to this point, and so we're gonna get this fixed.
Governor Seth Tupper, South Dakota Searchlight, you referenced eminent domain for carbon pipelines in your speech to the legislature. Can you turn your mic? Seth Tupper, South Dakota Searchlight. You mentioned eminent domain for carbon pipelines in your speech to the legislature. You referenced the need to protect property rights, but also to have predictable regulations, which sounded like maybe you wanted some kind of compromise. A compromise was tried last year, didn't work out so well. So I'm wondering, what's your position on eminent domain for carbon pipelines, the bill to ban it? What's your plan?
Position's the same. I have worked on legislation for 20 years to protect property rights. And I carried a bill in 2006 to reform the use of eminent domain. And I will always respect property rights, but we still have to protect opportunity in South Dakota. So yes, and again, I'm confident that we can find a middle ground in the legislature and accomplish both.
What's, just a follow-up, what's the middle ground though? It seems like either you support banning eminent domain for carbon pipelines or you don't, so. Do you have
Well,
a
it's in
position on
the
that?
hands of the legislature. They've got several pieces of legislation, and we'll see in the coming days and weeks how that conversation moves forward as far as what we come up with for ideas for compromise and that accomplish both.
Just last one, would you sign a ban on eminent domain for carbon pipelines?
I'm not gonna comment on what I would sign or veto based on conjecture.
Grant Green with Code Territory News and Dakota News Now. When it comes to your meeting yesterday with leadership about property taxes, I just want to know kind of what your biggest takeaways from that meeting and, moving forward, what are the biggest things left to discuss about the situation of property taxes?
Yeah, well, the conversation we had, we had already gleaned some fundamental ideas based on legislation that was floating around. And so we put together, a template, if you will, as a starting point. And our conversation in the last meeting revolved around that, and it worked very well because then ideas were brought forward from legislators on things we could do to enhance that language and go another step farther. And so we've got a working draft that's been evolving through these meetings. I expect the same thing to happen this afternoon. Come to attention, more legislators, as they heard what was going on, expressed interest. So we left it to the legislative leaderships to expand that group. And as the legislation evolves, so will that committee group, in my view, will continue to expand that group and the interested parties as we move through the process.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, he can't say this for himself. There's nobody in this building who knows more about property tax or has a longer history of working on this issue than Governor Rhoden. He's perfectly situated to bring this thing to a conclusion. He's carried major property tax reform bills throughout his career. He knows this issue backwards and forwards. He also knows how to work with legislators and work through these ideas and challenges and broker a deal. And I think there's a lot of optimism on this issue, frankly, because the governor is in the position he is now. This is the perfect opportunity to get this done this year.
Well, thank you. And also on that point, it's been encouraging to me because I think we're off to a really good start from, perspective. Like I've said before, we're pushing reset buttons, and one of the reset was with the legislature and operating in a more civil manner, and really encouraging to me to see their willingness to allow me to help facilitate that discussion.
And just as a quick follow-up, I know there's been a bunch of things thrown your way and it's still kind of early. So is there anything that, in your mind, like that stands out as far as the best way to, reduce property taxes, but that also establishes a fair tax burden for people of all income brackets?
Well, answer is yes, and I think that's very much on the track we're taking. We had a lot of different proposals, and obviously we're in a very tough budget situation. And so we need to be artful in finding a solution. And one of the formats that I laid out for the committee is, as we looked at some of the possible legislation that was coming forward, that we have specific areas in the state where that was a very pronounced problem with the elevated valuations in owner-occupied housing. And so rather than take a shotgun approach with some of the proposals did that affected us statewide, given the situation we were in, I feel very confident that we need to take a rifle shot. And what we do will be very targeted to provide assistance and relief to people that are getting kicked in the head the hardest on these increased property valuations. Yes, sir.
Governor, I'm Bart Vancook with South Dakota Newswatch. I appreciate the reset, as you call it, on open and civil communications. I think part of the problem, well, I know part of the problem that we as reporters have in getting good, complete information that we can inform the public with is really at the agency level, not necessarily from the governor's office. But can you do anything to open the lines of communication? I mean, getting someone from GF&P, Department of Ed or Health, even DANR on the phone to actually have a discussion about an issue so we can broaden our understanding and then write about it. Will you or can you do anything to open that door? Right now, it's very closed. People don't get back to you. They don't want to comment. I know people who try to reach GF&P officers, even in a situation that involved a big cat coming into a neighborhood, couldn't get anyone to talk about it. So that's a real problem. I speak, I think, on newspaper day for a lot of my colleagues. Can you do anything to open that flow of information?
By all means, I can. And we will address that. I've not, the general public that I deal with, or the people that have contacted me, I've put them in touch with agencies and they've been very responsive, and they're not being responsive to you. We will address that.
I can share with you more. I'll send you an email about some of the examples where I think that we could make some progress.
Well, I will, Mackenzie's in the room. She's my chief of staff. Have a visit with her when we're done today.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jonathan Ellis with the Dakota Scout. Not to monopolize this, but a follow-up on Stu's question about the prison. The former warden of that prison is saying that the images that are being shown on television, depicted on television, do not match reality. That we're being fed BS on this prison. That it's not crumbling. You're not being shown like the modern parts of the prison that exist currently. Like he said that the pipes that you talked about, that never gets used except in very rare circumstances with a certain class level of inmates. Do you have a response to what he's saying very publicly against this new prison? He says that he wants a stop for a year. Do you have a response to what he's saying?
Well, I won't disparage him, but I saw it for myself, and I know what I saw. So that brings into question what his agenda is. So I won't comment any further on that. Well, again, thank you all for being here. Was there? Oh, Bob.
Yeah, Bob Mercer with KELOLAND News. Could you give us an update on the budget situation?
Yes, I think, they were posted. I was trying to remember if the updated numbers that would have included Christmas sales have been posted yet, but I will say this. I was very hopeful and optimistic, very recently that our numbers would improve. It's safe to say they have not. And so from that front, our budget is going to continue to be, I think, nothing on the positive side has happened, I will say that.
If no one else, go ahead then.
Governor Rhoden, Jody Heemster, DRG Media Group here in Pierre. On not directly legislative related things, can you give us an update on your big party coming up this weekend for the inauguration? And any fun appearances or music or things that we should know about? And then also, have you and the First Lady talked about at all, the public side of the governor's mansion used to be open during the summer for public tours? Have you two had any conversations about potentially doing that again?
Well, I'll say this, you're talking to the wrong Rhoden. My wife has made it very clear, and I'm gonna have to do something about Linda Fridley, who's the chief of staff, because she informed my wife one of the first days that when it comes to the residents, that she's the boss. And same with the information on the inauguration. I've left that in my wife's hands, which has worked out really well for me because now she's not trying to be governor. Don't tell me I said that. So yeah, we're pretty excited about it. It started out, I kind of envisioned a very scaled down version of an inauguration. I don't think it's very scaled down. And so we're gonna have the regular inauguration ceremonies at 1 o'clock, and I think then 6 o'clock, come back for the inaugural ball. I think there's a private group that has planned an event after that over at the Ramcota. So it'll be pretty much a traditional inaugurations.
Where do you stand on education savings accounts? And do you see that coming back in some other form and possibly passing?
Well, it was, our legislation was held in committee in the House. There was some talk about the Senate coming up or reintroducing in the Senate. I don't know that that's based on my experience in the legislature or even definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expect different results. So my view is if it's going to be resurrected and salvaged, it should take place in the House. And I understand that they are having conversation about that and how they want to move forward. So we'll see.
You're a fan of it.
I supported the ESAs, yes.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Yes, sir.
Luke Hagan, Metro Republic. Governor, what's your early thoughts on the guide and outfitter bill? And do you think GF&P needs to have oversight of those people?
I'll say I'm not up to speed on that legislation, so I wouldn't have an answer for it. I will be
Last question.
getting informed though.
Last question.
Don McDash with the Argus Leader. Just wanted, I hate to bring us back to property taxes, but looking at the numbers from the last decade, we've seen property tax owner occupied payments rise by 60%, 2014 to 2023. You look at 2017 to 2023, home prices jumped 35%, but ag property only jumped 3%. Do you have any idea or feelings? I don't know if there's appetite for shifting taxes, from owner occupied to agriculture, but has there been any discussion to possibly balancing that at all?
Well, that goes to my opening remarks was exactly that there was a shift. The inflated property values or housing values when they went up, that created a shift away from the other two classes, one being ag, the other one commercial. But there's a lot of things at play in that system. And, when we went through the whole ordeal of changing the way ag land is taxed to productivity, a lot of that, I became very educated on our tax system. And one of the things that I would mention to you, because it came forward when we were working on that system, understand this, we have three classes of property, agriculture being one. In the housing market, if we're short on housing, we build more houses. We build more commercial businesses every day. So naturally, the valuation in those two classes go up fairly dramatically, the total value statewide. They quit making ag land a long time ago. In fact, every time you build a house, every time you build a housing development or commercial business at the edge of town, the total number of ag land shrinks. So it's more of a major factor than you might realize, but it's part of what skews the numbers. So you have to kind of look past all of that. But you're right, there has been a shift, and like I said, and we're looking at a solution that maybe might help bring that back into balance.
Governor, real quick before you go, the Super Bowl is on Sunday. Wanted to get your pick, Chiefs, Eagles, and final score prediction.
Yeah, I drive I have four sons, and I drive them nuts, because I always kind of keep my powder dry till about halftime of the Super Bowl.
That doesn't fly here.
And it's amazing how many times my team wins. But this year, I'm gonna commit early. I'm going to support the Eagles, only because Dean Wink, who followed me, took my place in the Senate when I left the Senate, and played for the Philadelphia Eagles, so got to show respect for my neighbors.
You got a final score?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
20 to 35.
All right, I like it. Thanks, guys.
Oh, you forgot to get his pick.
Oh, what was your pick, Tony? Come on.
Oh, I'll take the Chiefs, 27-21.
All right, there it is. You guys are divided. Thank you.